I'm standing on the steps of an institution that's been a part of Boise for 100 years, St. Joseph's Catholic School. This building's been here since 1925, and before that, since 1900, the school occupied two other buildings right here on the same block next to St. John's Cathedral on 4th between 7th and 8th. You know, a lot has changed over the last 100 years, like this state-of-the-art library built just last year. But one of the main reasons that generations of Boiseans continue to send their kids here is that so much has remained the same for 100 years.
You've been in the office for the same problem time and time again. We're going to have to fill out a detention report and send it home to your parents.
100 years of discipline.
100 years of nurturing.
100 years of masterpieces.
Okay, we've had some arguments on the playground about kickball, and I want you to stop and think when you're having a conflict with one of your classmates, how they would like to be treated.
100 years of Christian social behavior.
Positive or negative slope? Brandon. Positive.
100 years of academic excellence.
So it was in 1900, at the turn of the last century, that Bishop Glorio opened St. Joseph's Catholic School for Boys. Yes, Nicole?
So when did girls start coming to St. Joe's?
I think it was around 1950-something. Yes, Scott?
It was 1953, Mrs. Mallory. I've got it all right here on tape. Can I share it? Thank you very much, Mrs. Mallory. You're going to love this tape. The original St. John's Church and the adjacent St. Patrick's Hall at the corner of 9th and Bannock Streets was the first site of Catholic school in Boise in the late 1880s.
Bishop Glorio had requested our sisters from the Mother House. He had asked that we could get some sisters to come to Boise. In 1889, 5 of them arrived, and they arrived on August the 24th. September the 9th of the same year, they opened school in St. Patrick's Hall.
The Sisters of the Holy Cross opened an academy for girls in 1889 in St. Patrick's Hall. Then in 1891, the Sisters opened the new St. Teresa's Academy. Bishop Alphonse J. Glorio, from the beginning, was very interested in establishing a Catholic boys' school in Boise.
It was about 10 years later, the pastor requested sisters again to teach and open a boys' school. St. Teresa's was just girls. So the sisters then, at that time, didn't have enough sisters to open that school. Sister Frances Clare was the superior at St. Teresa's, so she prayed to St. Joseph. And she told him that if he would send her a sister to open that school, she would name the school St. Joseph's. And to this day, it has that name. She got the sister. And they opened the school then, and this one was just for boys.
In 1902, Bishop Glorio purchased a block of property bounded by Hayes and Fort Streets between 8th and 9th. The cornerstone of the new St. John's Cathedral was laid in 1906.
You know, Boise was a small town, and Bishop Gloria at the time was a very energetic person, and he very quickly met the Hummel family, particularly my grandmother, of course, and the firm started designing pretty substantial buildings right away, including some churches, including some work for the Episcopal Church. They weren't given an exclusive on designing the cathedral. The bishop actually asked for competing designs from various people, but they picked my grandfather's design.
When the church was being moved and the hall, it burned. In the meantime, they had already constructed the basement of the new place. So when that basement was completed, the school, St. Joseph's School at that time, and the church was used temporarily. I think they used that 12 years.
In them days, the outhouse was outside. When I went to school in the 4th grade, we had to go outside to even hang our coats up. The classrooms all that we went to. And then when we went over to the 7th and 8th grade, we got a big promotion. The cloakroom was inside. But we still had to walk around to school to get to the privy.
You were there.
There was just one building that stood right by the cathedral facing 8th Street, and it was just split in two. And there was just two, the building was divided, one taught in half and one in the other half.
Roy Turner and we served one of the first masses in the cathedral when the new altar was put in, when the cathedral was finished. And one thing I remember when they was working on the cathedral, Roy and we was laying out on the front steps there, and they had these crates. Roy reached over to pick up something, and he stepped on one end of the crate and had a nail in it that hit him right in the cheek, right just below the eye, right there. And all he said was, "Oh boy."
I liked the sisters, especially, they were good to me. They didn't rap on me much. Sister Leontia was a little rough sometimes, but I don't blame her. I would have been rough if I'd have been in their place. Sister Mildred and Sister Leontia, the two nuns that used to walk down from St. Teresa's every morning, carried their own lunch, paper bag, and walked back in the evening after the school.
There were 8 in our class, in my class when I graduated. And Bill Reagan, Norman Herbst, and Eugene Thyssen, and Bobby and Harold Williams, Carol Wilcombe, and Ronald Manley, I think, were the others, the rest of the graduating class. Just about everybody have played football, and we have to go down in the grade school to get a few of the better or bigger or better players from down there to make a football team, and then the basketball team was pretty much upstairs in the high school group.
I started at St. Joseph's in 1925. We were the first grade in the brick building, the new brick building, and it's now the old brick building, but it was super. We had, I can remember, I was only 5 years old, and I went over to see Monsignor O'Toole, and he asked me some questions, see whether I could get in. I just turned 5, and he said, well, you might as well send you over there. And so I started the first grade there and went all through grade school for 8 years, and it was wonderful.
Of course, when I entered in 1931, both floors were in use, and the high school was upstairs. And the high school was there until 1933. It was a very interesting school grounds. The old church was still there where the gymnasium is today, and being used as a gymnasium by that time. And the school grounds weren't paved like they are today. They were sandy. And it was sometimes I think it was like the survival of the fittest.
After Bishop Gorman's death in 1927, Bishop Edward Kelly carried on an intense dedication to Catholic education. In 1933, Bishop Kelly decided all high school students should be transferred to St. Teresa's Academy. St. Joseph's School once again served only elementary-aged boys.
We moved to Boise from Kansas in '38, and I started at St. Joseph's in November of 1938 in the 4th grade. Graduated in 1943. At that time, it was an all-boys school, and we wore uniform cords and white shirts, gray cords, and the school was taught by Sisters of the Holy Cross. And the pastor of St. John's then, or the rector of the cathedral, was Monsignor O'Toole. He was followed by Monsignor Rowe.
I came to St. Joseph's in the year 1957 in 5th grade. And I stayed there until 1960 when we went to St. Teresa's Academy.
The sisters all wore full habits. They had rosary beads that were probably 4 feet long, as I remember, almost to the floor. And they wore a blue cincture or cord on the other side that was huge, like maybe close to an inch in diameter. And I remember one time, we had the old-fashioned desks that were 2 or 3 desks were hooked together on runners. And someone did something that caught the sister's attention while she was at the back of the room where I sat. And she came around my desk so fast that her cord was flapping in the wind. and she caught the corner of the desk, and she pulled all 3 of the kids in that run clear around. And she got to the front and got whatever was going on handled immediately, and then asked us to straighten up our desks, and we did, and that was that.
The discipline and the respect that you had for the nuns. You know, here I am going to be 80 in June, and I can still remember if a woman walks in, I stand up automatically. Man, if I didn't, well, those nuns would have had me. They had little clickers, and particularly I can remember when you went over Mass on Sunday, if you turned your head, click, click, click.
When you got to 8th grade, you were a big cheese. And the sisters had to delegate authority, and they picked the 8th graders, and it was a great honor to be one of the people who would go sit with the 5th grade and watch them eat their lunch in silence. I can remember not everyone played exactly by the rules. That I think when I was in 5th grade, the person who ate with us, if you did something that caught his eye, he'd throw an eraser at you. And you could always tell because the kids who misbehaved, because on the dark blue sweaters would be great big chalk marks. The rector would hand out report cards. And Monsignor Rowe was our rector for, I think, the first 6 years. I think he died while we were at school. But he was a man to be feared, or so thought all the students. And the worst fate that you could have on report card day was for him to take your report card and put it into the cuff on his sleeve, because you had to see him afterwards. Many people only had that happen one time. It really helped in discipline and in grades to go visit the rector.
Throughout the 60s, parents who were graduates began to send their children to St. Joe's. A Catholic education provided a structured, safe Christian environment in a time of national change.
Well, we had a few challenges, I would say, and one was the playground because we had the children all over the place. We had them across the street from the cathedral in that lot. Some of the children were there, some were in the lot off of 9th Street, and then the smaller children played on the school grounds. And that was one big challenge. Another thing that was a highlight while I was there was the opening of the kindergarten. We did open that while I was there, and we had a lay teacher then in the kindergarten also.
We wore uniforms. They were navy blue skirts that were wool, navy blue sweaters that were wool, and you can imagine how that felt about May. We had to wear white socks and Oxford shoes, white Peter Pan collared shirts. We wore beanies.
It was smaller than it is now, although the classes were actually a lot bigger. I look at our class picture, and there are 35 people, I think, in my class. Of course, all nuns, except for one. And we didn't have school lunch back then. Everybody brought their sack lunches. I remember the classroom always smelled like tuna fish sandwiches, steaming away in the closet.
I have nothing but good things and good memories. If anything, I'd like to apologize to about all my teachers for all the talking I did in class and the naughty things I did and you know, the trouble I made, because I was kind of I'm sure I was kind of a challenge. But I learned a lot, and it's all good memories.
When we were good on special occasions, we got to go to the Greens Park, which is right there behind Baird's Dry Cleaners. And that was the only grass I think we ever played on. And then later on, I think when I was in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, they started having field trips. And so we went to Campbell's Back Park. That was the big deal for the year.
The memories I have of St. Joseph's, for the most part, are all good ones. Made a lot of good friends whom I still keep in touch with. See them sometimes weekly at church or elsewhere. I think I got a great education there. Really, the sisters put a lot of emphasis on the basics, reading, writing, spelling, skills that you build on and use all your life. And so I'm very grateful for that. The sisters were quick to discipline, but at the same time were rewarding of good behavior and encouraged that. I think it was a great education, really.
I remember my 2nd grade teacher, Sister Patrice,
was the first one to come in with a shorter habit on that was almost up to her knees, and I think it was quite sensational for the other sisters at the time.
I had a lot of friends at St. Joe's, obviously, but I had a lot of friends outside that went to public schools. And one of the things that, especially when I got into 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, they'd ask me, well, don't you want to go to a public school? And I never thought about it. I always would ask them, I go, well, why? I'm having so much fun at St. Joe's, and I had a lot of great friends. We did a lot of really neat things together, a lot of fun things. Got into a little trouble.
Monsignor Hughes would visit with us on the playground at lunchtime. We'd see him out there, and he had a huge boat of a car. We were always, in retrospect, my sisters and I always wondered how he managed to get that big boat through the driveway and into the garage of the rectory without removing, half the church or wiping out a few kids, in the process and that sort of thing.
When the school bell would ring at recess, at least in my early years, the first time it rang, you had to freeze. And so again, as kids, we thought that was great fun. You'd stop in any position like you were playing freeze tag or something. And on the second bell, you'd make the sign of the cross. And then on third, you'd get in your line and go into class.
Mass was held every morning. I remember in my early grade school years, you had to have your head covered, the girls did. And you were always quite impressed with some girls' little veils because it'd be the longer ones. So it was almost like, ooh, it looks like she has long hair, these gals with their long little veils, and others would have real petite ones. And if you had nothing at all, well, then you'd pin a Kleenex on the top of your head.
We had Sister Claracine, and anyone who went to school in the same era that I did remembers her clicker. And she would click when you were all to genuflect uniformly and then back up and, gave us our signals. And so everybody in my era laughs about Sister Claracine's clicker.
We did have Sister Claracine and her clicker, but someone by the time I was in 2nd grade had learned how to mimic it, and so they'd make that noise, so half the class would genuflect at the wrong time. She didn't care for that much.
All my family went there. My brothers started in 1954. My oldest brother, Frank, started at St. Joe's. And I was the last of the Talboy kids to leave in the 6th grade.
I remember when the snow came off the cathedral while Sister Claracine was under it. That was a biggie. She dropped her knees and started praying, and she was fine. It looked like you'd have thought it would kill her the way that snow was coming down.
And we wore uniforms. Our uniforms were blue and white, and little pleated skirts and little white shirts. And then somewhere along the lines, they changed us to yellow and brown uniforms, and they were pretty atrocious.
Well, of course, we had the nuns, which was completely different. When we'd go to Mass, we had to kneel up straight and hold our hands perfectly straight. And they were strict, but they weren't, you hear horror stories about nuns, and they were not horrible.
When we were getting our report cards, Monsignor Hughes used to come in his full black cassock, buttoned up to the top with a little white collar, and he had these little round glasses, and he would come to each of the classrooms and sit in the teacher's desk, which was always in the front. We always sat in rows, and your name was called, and you had to walk up, and he would peer over the brim of his glasses and look at your report card, then look at you, and look back down at the report card, and if you had done a nice job, you'd get a little pat on the head and back, and if you had done you guys remember this? Yeah. If you had gotten maybe a not so hot grade, then he would, have a little conference with you there in front of the class. Or out in the hallway. I never got out in the hallway.
Neither did I. Our Father made sacrifices to send us there, and again, I want to be sending my children there because I was pleased with what I came out with.
The classes were really small. I think we only had, like in my graduating 8th grade class, there may have been just 17 of us. So it was very small, very close-knit. Everybody kind of knew what everybody was, doing.
One thing I remember is being chased home. We lived 2.5 blocks from the school. And every day, Pat Shawls and Ricky Abasian would chase me and Pixie Heroin home down 8th Street.
Did they ever catch it?
Never. They're still chasing. There was this one priest, and I don't remember his name. He used to say, like, they used to have a 6 o'clock mass, and he was old and skinny. And when that mass got out, and I don't know if he went and had breakfast, then he'd come outside when school was starting, and he used to jump rope with us. Do you guys remember that? Yeah, so I remember him jumping rope with us, and I just thought that was neat. I'd never seen a priest jump rope. So it kind of made him a real person, to me anyway.
This is my son, Andrew Skinner, and he is in the kindergarten. And I chose to send him to St. Joe's for many reasons. I teach there, so I have the extra added bonus of being able to teach at the same school that my children will be attending.
Kylie is in 1st grade at St. Joe's, and we wanted her to be hopefully part of a community, a small religious community as her background.
Basically, I'm a firm believer in the Catholic school education. I think it was very good for me, and I felt it was very good for my sons. And I have 4 sons, and I'm proud of them, and they haven't done too bad for kids.
We raced back to Boise to start our family, and there was never any doubt in my mind once I got back to Boise that I wanted to send my kids to St. Joe's because of tradition, and it's a good school. It's a really good school.
The idea of tradition, sort of carrying on, I think also the emphasis on religious education and moral instruction, I think is very useful. I think that's as important as anything as far as education goes. And then again, just the emphasis, I think, on the basics of a good education that'll serve them all their life.
They really drilled everything we need to know for several years in high school really into us, so we're ahead of most of the other students, even the other ones from the Catholic schools.
First and foremost, we send them there for the religious education. I think it's great that we can practice religion at home, and then we can send our kids to school and they can talk about God, and they can pray if they want to, and there are not those divisions where you're at school and you can't talk about God.
I think, again, I like the ability to be part of something that's important, and the responsibility that I have in making a difference in kids' lives, but not only just in their academics, but as a role model and as a person who has gone through the system and can testify that, you know, it does work and it is good for you, and the person that you become really is contingent on what you've had before.
I think the staff is great. I really appreciate their religious training that they're taking so that they can educate my children beyond what I educate them at home. I feel safe dropping them off. I know that the office staff, the teachers, everybody knows my kids, and everybody knows everybody by name, and I know they'll watch out for them, and I know that they're safe there. And I don't get concerned about things that we see happening in the public schools.
Sometimes we watch these children come down that aisle in the cathedral on graduation night, and to have seen them come to kindergarten and holding on to your side, and they're crying because mom's leaving, and to see these young men and women walk down the aisle and to see what they have gained, it gives us a great sense. And for me, a small part of their lives have been what I've helped them accomplish, and it makes me feel very good and very proud of our school and of the children to see what they have accomplished in their lives.
Every single morning they come through the doors and they have these great smiles of expectation on their face as to what is the new day going to bring them. And I absolutely love seeing them in the morning and saying good morning to them and greeting them, and they're just absolutely a delight.
I have the best job. I have a variety. I get to be with the kids in the morning. I get to be with them on the playground, sometimes get to play some of the games.
When I was in elementary school, I attended a small school in Medford, Oregon that was Catholic, and that was very important to me. The nuns at that school were wonderful role models for me, and I remember in 3rd grade saying that's what I wanted to do.
You have more added responsibilities when you send your child to a Catholic school, because with us as being a small school, you're asked to do a lot more for your school and become involved in the school. And really, without the parents, our school could not be as great as it is. The parents are our best resource for volunteers and for everything they do. Without parents and the volunteer hours they put in, our school would not be the school it is.
I hope the students come out of St. Joe's as well-rounded individuals with a firm knowledge of their faith, that they understand that God loves them, that Jesus is there for them and he's their friend, and that they go on to high school and to college with good study habits, and so they can be successful citizens.
I hope that they learn respect for others, have great self-esteem, and I hope that we have given them the tools to go on into high school and into life and be able to survive and do well and to reach the goals that they have set for themselves. And I think we can help them do that at St. Joe's.
So that's the St. Joe's story. What started small has become an educational tradition for thousands of families. Some 300 students go to St. Joe's, and there's a pretty hefty waiting list. The Archdiocese is hoping to start a junior high school to keep up with the city's growth. But as you can see, I think I'm already outnumbered.
Joyful, joyful.